Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening edition of the Female Solution Global Broadcast. I'm Naima Latif, your host for these next two Wednesday evenings this week and the week after, the second and the fourth Wednesdays of this month, to introduce to you a special presentation. We're introducing the on air daily news hour. So, we're looking forward to sharing with you some of that uplifting, inspiring news as presented by the on air daily news, which is a website that gives you some alternative presentations and viewpoints that can perhaps make the world seem a little less scary and a little less ominous because we're giving you insight on people who are making a positive difference in the world. So we'll be right back to share with you some on air daily news. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Women have the power to transform this world. We can end crime and violence if we all agree to do one thing: share. Let's share our wisdom, share our time, share our talents, share our finances, but most of all, let's share our love. This is the Female Solution.
Yes, this is the female solution, and the females have the solution, which we hope to share with the males, which is basically, as we said, if we just share, if we just learn how to get along, and if we just make things fair for everyone. Well, this week has been a momentous time, this week and last week, a momentous time in commemorating the life of one among us who has had a global impact. And because of the impact of the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr., many who were not politically aware or astute have learned quite a bit of history. Many have become aware of some of the historic events that have shaped our lives and have made some changes in the landscape across this nation because this is a country that has been divided. Its origins started out divided as a result of an economic policy. Now, in the beginning, there were those who came to America fleeing an oppressive system in Great Britain, fleeing the British monarchy. And what many people don't know, they got the idea from the Iroquois nation, the Native Americans, who had like a council where they united with the six independent sovereign nations or tribes, and they worked out a way to interact peacefully. This was different than what the English settlers were accustomed to. They were accustomed to a king, a monarchy, one person who ruled, and then a succession of feudal lords underneath that ruled certain parts of the landscape. And then the people had to work and pay taxes to them in exchange for protection. That whole feudal system was very oppressive. But this is what those who were fleeing that system were familiar with. But interacting with the Native Americans, and of course, we all know Benjamin Franklin was one of those very prominent so-called founding fathers who helped to shape the Constitution of America and the philosophy governing America. But the idea of individual states having freedoms and being able to cooperate came from the Native Americans. So that's a bit of history that we want to share before we get into why an individual born in the South, a Southern region slowly evolving out of its slave state mentality, was so significant, because a mindset had to be changed in America. First, presenting the idea of free land. People could work the land and they didn't have to pay, feudal lords didn't have to pay anyone to protect them, and they could stake their claim. And then, of course, the idea of indentured servants was introduced. And people could come and work off a debt. Many who came out of debtor's prison. And so they came as indentured servants working for a 7-year period to pay off their debt. And of course, this evolved into the idea of permanent servants, not indentured for a limited period of time, but indentured for life. So the system of slavery evolved out of an economic policy that evolved out of a philosophy that was still in the minds of those who came to this free land to settle. And at the same time, there were warring factions on the continent of Africa. Those captured prisoners of war could be sold for a price to another nation or another group by the winning side. So here we have the beginnings of the slave trade. So let's be clear. It's not a black and white issue. It's about greed and exploitation. And this was the philosophy that governed America. And the slave trade was one that was willingly participated in by those who were trying to get rid of their prisoners of war and make a profit. Of course, these historic realities are often uncomfortable because they point to no one race of people as the guilty party. Everybody who was willing to participate in such an exploitive system was guilty of greed, a human failing. So this is the foundation that we find ourselves in as America in 1776 was creating a new kind of society based on a higher spiritual principle followed by the Native Americans and imitated by those who developed the Constitution. But by that time, they were deeply entrenched in a policy, an economic policy that included the exploitation of those they were importing. And by that time, slavery had become big business. So let's take a look at the foundation of America and what had to be uprooted, and why those individuals who were part of the movement of abolishing this way of thinking are so significant. So we talked about the protest movements. And in this morning's show, we, of course, if you missed it, feel free to go back on our YouTube page or Facebook page, The Female Solution, and hear a wonderful interview with our photojournalist who traveled to Selma, Alabama to commemorate a very significant event, a very significant milestone in the struggle, in the fight to overcome and overturn a way of thinking that allowed for the cruelty and exploitation of those people who descended from those forcibly imported from Africa. Valerie Goodloe, in her imagery, captured a march of victory, truly, by those who participated in the 61st commemoration of what has been known as Bloody Sunday. But there's a history behind the march and a history behind the need for the march, because Selma, Alabama, along with many other southern states, were bent on maintaining a system of racial inequality and segregation and discrimination that has been a long part of this nation's economic policy. The engine that drives America and America's economy has been slavery. And also, in addition to the enslavement and the forced labor, the prison industry, also a concept brought from Europe, has been part of Americans' economy. So written in the institution, the Constitution, written in the American Constitution, is the institution of prison as a continuation of the institution of slavery. Slavery was abolished except for if one has been duly convicted of a crime. It's in the Constitution. So slavery was never really abolished, just repurposed. And so this remains something that is driving America's philosophy and the policies that are unfair and cruel and cause people to end up behind bars, sometimes guilty of a crime, sometimes not, but always having to pay to get out or to get legal representation to help prove their innocence. And it's an exploitive system that is truly designed to maintain the same philosophy that created the slave system, which was a way of thinking imported from Europe and certainly not part of the native landscape. So where do we go from here? Well, we want to give you that bit of background information so that you can understand present day events and what it is that needs to happen to change the mind that is created in a very unfair, unequal system of exploitation for economic gain. That is the real roots of America. And those who have spoken out and historically have been championing the cause of freedom, justice, and equality are uprooting that long-held belief that someone must be exploited in order for others to maintain economic stability. That way of thinking must be abolished. So, we're going to take a break and greet our global family. And when we come back, we'll talk about the commemoration of a life well lived of one among us who has been fighting for America to become the truly liberated place that represents freedom, justice, and equality for all, for real. What did it take to make the changes happen so that we could see a new society? We'll talk about that and how Reverend Jesse Jackson's influence on the nation and the world was seen through the eyes of his children. We'll be right back after this quick break, so stay with us.
We are global transformers, changing the world from the way it is to the way it should be. We are one. Wherever we live on this earth, we are one human family. On behalf of our team of radio hosts, I'd like to extend a greeting to all the members of our family, whenever and wherever you may be listening around the world. To our family in China, Ni Hao. In India, Namaste. In Japan, Konnichiwa. In Korea, Annyeonghaseyo. In Russia, Здравствуйте. In Germany, Guten Tag. In Poland, Dzień dobry. In France, Bonjour. In Spain, Hola. In Italy, Ciao. In Egypt, Ahlan wa sahlan. In Ghana, Akwaba. In Nigeria, Peleo. In South Africa, Sawubona. In Senegal, Nangadef. In Kenya, Jambo. In Israel, Shalom. In Pakistan, Afghanistan, Palestine, and Saudi Arabia, Assalamu alaikum. Greetings, and may peace be upon you all. Join us live on the on-air radio network called 727-731-5192. We want to talk to you. Yes, we do want to talk to you, and we want you to talk to us too. Welcome to the On Air Daily News Hour, and we are excited because we are sharing with you not just news, but history. In today's edition of On Air Daily News, we are sharing an event that happened in Selma, Alabama over the weekend, a commemoration of what's been known as Bloody Sunday. Now, of course, for those who are not aware, the fight to end segregation was not peaceful, even though the marches, the sit-ins, and the pray-ins, and all of those activities of protests were guided by the philosophy introduced by Mahatma Gandhi, who greatly influenced Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, all of this is history that's been recited over and over again, but not for this present day generation. Many of them don't make the connection. So the tactic of nonviolent protest was used by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a way to confront those who were violent and cruel in their resistance to integration. In other words, letting people who were of African descent and darker than their European counterparts do something as simple as go to the same school, drink from the same water fountain, ride on the front of a bus, just ridiculous things. The ridiculosity
of the system of segregation was such that it made absolutely no sense, but it was designed to psychologically damage those who were forced to accept treatment that was insulting, as if to reinforce the idea of you're nobody, you're lesser than, you're inferior. So this was the kind of psychological warfare happening. And it is, you can't just say it's something that came out of Europe, because globally, human beings create hierarchies that are cruel and unjust and unfair and emotionally damaging. But this was the law in the southern parts of the United States. And so when a group of 600 protesters walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, as a peaceful demonstration protesting segregation, they were met with state troops ordered by the then governor, George Wallace, to beat them back and force them back across that bridge. And they were beaten mercilessly until they were bloody and broken bones and had to have stitches and just hospital care. They were beaten severely. And so this march was commemorated, known as Bloody Sunday. That Sunday in March in 1965, when peaceful protesters were beaten so bloody. And one man, Congressman, eventually he came to be, John Lewis, was one of those who was beaten. And he rose, of course, to become a congressman. And there's talk of renaming that bridge after him. But he was one of those courageous marchers who faced those violent state troopers. And so every year, this march across the bridge is commemorated with a march across the bridge. And of course, now there are no state troopers, but the significance of this march is that it galvanized the nation behind the freedom movement, behind the movement to end segregation and racial injustice. And people came in busloads from across the country to Selma, Alabama. And they had another march, and those marchers were not attacked. And there were whites joining the blacks, and the young joining the old. And this was one of those moments that turned the tide in the civil rights movement, because people were so outraged at the cruelty. And so this weekend, the youngest son of Reverend Jesse Jackson, Yusuf Jackson, shown here leading the march. Of course, his father would have been among those leaders of that commemorative march, as he had been in the past years. And so this was very much symbolically passing the torch to this present generation to create a new society in which there is no racial hatred and injustice and fear of violence. And on our homepage of the On Air Daily News, of course, we are giving that history for those who may not have been alive. And there were many who joined this march, and 2 busloads came from Chicago, Minneapolis. A group from Minneapolis joined and met in Chicago to take that bus ride. And we had an opportunity to get a first-hand view from photojournalist Valerie Goodlow, who covered this event and the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And as you can see from these photos, that there are some who are elderly making that march, some that have been around since the 60s and are still making a statement that they are still fighting for justice. So we want to take a look at the power of our voices to stand up and be heard. And this is a critical thing because many of our children are not learning history. They're not learning politics. They're not learning economics. They're not learning the origins of this country in order to understand what needs to be changed. Because right now, what needs to be changed is an economic system based on exploitation. That is what we have. So we want to share with you some of the tributes given to Reverend Jesse Jackson by his children who realized what they learned from his life in fighting injustice and changing America to reflect its supposed real purpose, which was to create a society in which all people are equal. And did not the Declaration of Independence say we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal? Well, of course, we know that men needs to be expanded in definition to include human, which means male and female. And if we say we're all created equal, then that means there can be no enslavement of one group of people who happen to be geographically from another place and have different physical attributes. Because if we're all created equal, then that must be reflected in the systems, the economic systems. But let's listen to some words from Jonathan Jackson, who is now a U.S. congressman, as he looks back on his transformation in understanding about the politics and the economics and his father's drive to change things so that we are truly living up to a creed of equality and justice for all.
I didn't understand economic exclusion and the fight for economic inclusion. I didn't understand what was happening in South Africa and apartheid. I didn't understand. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a great source of pain for me to hear people talk about my father. But let me tell you, that was only because I was a child. And when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I understood like a child. And I thought like a child. But when I became a man, I put those childish things away.
Yes. Well, that is what our children must do today. Many who don't understand economics, politics, and how it all intertwines to create the conditions that many are suffering under. As they become adults, it's time they understood. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll share more insights from the children of Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. during his ongoing celebrations that brought 3 presidents to Chicago, Stevie Wonder to perform, and many others from across the world, from the continent of Africa and other places around the world where Reverend Jackson has had an impact. They came to pay tribute. But we want to hear from his children, those who are carrying the legacy and giving us insight on what it meant to be growing up in a household with a world leader that changed the world. We'll be right back after this quick break, so we want you to stay with us.
Welcome to Master Force with Mushim Soot. Join us each week on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Central, live on Facebook and YouTube on the Female Solution page, as we dive into powerful topics designed to assist you in mastering your life force. Our conversations feature a diverse lineup of experts, all dedicated to your growth. Tune in weekly to discover new ways to elevate your spirit and raise your vibration. And remember, we are ascending.
Yes, we are ascending. I'm Naima Latif, and you are watching the On Air Daily News Hour. And we are excited to bring you this second and fourth Wednesday evening daily news from the On Air Daily News website. And we have been giving insight about this very powerful homegoing celebration that Reverend Jesse Jackson had. And it was phenomenal. Those who participated and those who were affected by his life, because in fact, he was responsible for reversing much of the slavery time based attitudes and laws so that America could truly live up to its creed. So now we're going to hear from his firstborn son, secondborn child, Jesse Jackson Jr., his namesake. Definitely one whose intense life has been a learning experience as well as an opportunity. And the former congressman and current candidate for Congress points out how his father was a consistent voice for the downtrodden, which sometimes put him at odds with those who held positions in government, especially when government policies were unfair or unjust. But as an activist and champion for righteousness, Reverend Jackson never wavered from his commitment to the people. So let's hear some words from Jesse Jackson Jr. And as he reflects on much of the pomp and circumstance of those presidents who came the day before to the House of Hope to honor Reverend Jackson, and a different point of view of Reverend Jackson, not as a politician, but as a freedom fighter, is one that his children sought to share. Let's listen to Jesse Jackson Jr.
Yesterday, I listened for several hours, 3 United States presidents who do not know Jesse Jackson. maintained a tense relationship with the political order, not because the presidents were white or black, but the demands of our message, the demands of speaking for the least of these, those who were disinherited, the damned, the dispossessed, the disrespected, demanded not Democratic or Republican solutions, but demanded a consistent, prophetic voice that at no point in time ever sold us out as a people. And it speaks volumes about who the Reverend Jesse Jackson was. Our message has already been delivered today. I can see it all over my mother's face. Rise, Jesse, rise. Give Jonathan Jackson another great round of applause for delivering our favorite message to the world. Let's hear it for the Congressman. There'll be no different message that leads this service than the one that Jonathan Jackson has blessed us with. I want to thank my sister Ashley, and on behalf of all of our siblings, there is something about the blood of service that Jesse Jackson has given to all of us. Ashley is an extraordinary individual, a very, very talented young lady, and I am so grateful, we're all so grateful to call her our sister. Thank you. A gift to us from our Father. My sister Santita, whose talents are so extraordinary that I've always wondered why they're so contained. So grateful for scholarship, her input, her thinking, her being our oldest. She doesn't like oldest, she likes eldest sibling. We want to thank Santita in a very special way for her leadership. Give Santita a great round. Let's hear it for Santita. And if we can listen once again to 4 presidents yesterday, 3 of whom happened to be U.S. presidents who did not know my father, we can certainly listen to Jacqueline Jackson. We can listen to Jacqueline Jackson, who cared for my father. Give her the round of applause that she deserves. And last but not least, for 64 years before we heard of progressive nuclear palsy or Parkinson's disease, my father in North Carolina A&T said that he was standing at the cafeteria when he saw a young, fresh woman walking across the campus. And Mommy, at least as the story was conveyed to me, he said something to the effect that you're going to be my wife one day. Mama said to him, you're going to have to work hard to make that the case, my wife. For 64 years, with a particular emphasis since Reverend's diagnosis of initially Parkinson's disease, but a further diagnosis that revealed pseudo-nuclear palsy. Whether the weather was rain or whether the weather was cold, Whether things were going well or things were not going well, the mountaintops that marriages reach as well as the valley that they reach, Jacqueline Jackson has been the enduring force in the ministry of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and she lent him to the world. Give Mrs. Jackson the honor that she deserves.
Yes, absolutely. Deserving of the honor. And this is definitely a time to reflect. We are seeing that Reverend Jesse Jackson's children are able to see clearly and set the record straight on so many historic points. Now, as you can see, the On Air Daily News, you can reach it at onair.dailynews.com for those insights. And we're going to bring you another tribute from another sibling, because the children are the best reflection of the real purpose and the real teaching of Reverend Jesse Jackson. Going to share with you, first of all, a little bit of the musical tribute from his sister, Santita Jackson.
I will be done with the troubles of the world. The troubles of this world. With the troubles of this world. With the troubles of this world, I'm going home to live with God no more, no more.
So now this, of course, was just part of a powerful, powerful musical tribute. We're going to take another break and come back with more of the Jackson children from the On Air Daily News report. And again, you can go to onair.dailynews.com, and we'll be right back after this quick break. So stick and stay. Don't stray away. Be back in a moment. Stay with us.
Peace and love. I'm Michelle Renee, host of Education Nation, live on the Female Solution Global Network every second and fourth Sunday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. The intention of Education Nation is to raise awareness about the literacy crisis and to offer information to combat the problem. The goal is to awaken an army of reading coaches and mentors. You will experience guests who are doing their part in the community to ensure youth in their circles are reading and thinking critically. I look forward to serving you in this capacity. Literacy is freedom, and Education Nation will offer information and strategies to help ensure our young people stay free.
Leaders of Nonprofits Empowering Worlds, let's go.
But the vision that God gave me, I felt that it was time for me to step out and work on the vision that God gave me.
We need look no further. We have a unique voice. We have a unique talent pool.
And we are back. You are watching the Female Solution Global broadcast. And on tonight, the second and fourth Wednesdays this month, we're introducing the on-air daily news hour. So we can give you the insight from the on-air daily news website that gives you such empowering, inspiring information. So today we're looking at that special time in which our nation and indeed much of the world commemorated the life of Reverend Jesse Jackson. But one of the things that moved us was the tributes from his children. So let's continue with Dr. Jacqueline Jackson, who's the fifth child in the Jackson family. And Dr. Jacqueline Jackson gave the audience a special insight as a caretaker for her father and one who shared much of his private time away from the crowds. She expressed gratitude for those dedicated caregivers who helped him manage the very challenging progression of his physical illness. Let's hear some of her work.
Friends and family, kith and kin. I'm grateful for your warm embrace. As our family, we kneel to you and express endless gratitude for your incredibly warm and needed outreach. Thank you. And we're so fortunate to celebrate one so deserving of these honors. I pray for your patience as I prepare to extend my arm. I am so grateful to my mom, Mrs. Jacqueline Jackson, for whom I am her namesake, for asking that I stand and serve beside her as one of my father's principal caregivers. I'm so forever thankful to our Lord for providing me with a much deeper bond with our siblings during these past months. I'd also like to take the time to thank what amounts to legions of friends and taxis and Uber rides to and from hospitals. I cannot express really the enormity of my gratitude for the round-the-clock security and our team of medical attendants whose numbers over the years have truly been quite massive, extending not only across this incredibly precious city, but quite literally across the nation, across the world. I had the distinct honor of feeding our father and providing for several of the prescribed home therapies. And the like. While a formidable and dedicated team of caretakers tended to all variety of his growing needs, to that end, there's absolutely no way my conscience would rest without personally thanking Mr. Chris Hodges. For befriending our dad's journey with unbelievable care, steadfastness, and a loyalty only comparable to the implacable Shelley Davis. And our very own Uncle St. Clair Booker, now deceased, who without a doubt, can never be dismissed as our father's irreplaceable wingman. Last but certainly not least, I must thank Mr. Idris Adekbi, our senior caregiver. He certainly deserves high recognition for the dedicated and compassionate care he provided for my father for years he arrived on site to absolutely incredible and increasingly difficult tasks. He'd walk through the door in his princely way, and he'd exclaim, so as to be heard by Dad, some rooms away, "Good morning, sir. Good morning, Reverend." Dad's eyes, because I was there, Dad's eyes would just beam and occasionally tear. His chest would swell. Mr. Idris was unfailing in alertness to the growing constraints of Dad's physicality and the possibility of its threat to his personhood.
Yes, such powerful, heartfelt words. And if you've ever cared for an elderly parent down to the end, you know the heart of Dr. Jacqueline Jackson, his daughter, who was there by his side in those very special moments. So now we're going to hear from another sibling. And again, this gives us a bit of insight into the life of Reverend Jackson. Ashley Jackson. And Ashley is the youngest of Reverend Jackson's children. Ashley recalled the personal history lesson given to her by her father when he took her on a trip to the home he grew up in, the tiny house in South Carolina, so she could see his very humble beginnings and recognize the experiences that motivated him to dedicate his life to fighting to end poverty, segregation, discrimination, and injustice. Much of the younger generation doesn't quite get it because they weren't alive during those times. And so now she gets a personal view of real history.
Years before I was born, at the 1988 Democratic National Convention, my beloved father stood before the country and said, "They see me running for the White House, but they don't see the house I'm running from." When I was 15 years old, he took me to that house. We called it a daddy-daughter road trip through the American South, which in our case included the Honorable Reverend Clay Evans and a small caravan of Rainbow Push staff. Intimate. We drove through Montgomery and Selma, through Georgia, and ended in Greenville, South Carolina, where he was born. He walked me down the streets that raised him, showed me his high school, the neighborhoods that formed him, and then stopped in front of a quaint property on Haney Street. He brought me to the front window of the room where my grandmother gave birth to him and said, "This is where I come from." At 15, I nodded with teenage understanding, but now nearly 12 years later, I recognize that he wasn't simply showing me a house. He was teaching me something about beginnings, that even when they are shadowed, they still hold light. That the distance between where you start and where you stand is sacred ground, and that what you build in that distance becomes your character. He used to say that we may not all be famous, but we can all be great. As a child, I thought that greatness meant scale, crowds, platforms, a name everyone knew. As I grew older, I understood he meant something quieter and far more demanding. Greatness was service. It was consistency. It was feeding people when no one was watching. The headlines captured the rallies and the campaigns, but they did not always capture the hospital rooms, the late night calls on behalf of someone the world had already forgotten, the stories he carried from strangers along the way. See, Dad's theology was rooted in the belief that every human being carries an inherent worth. And he fought for that truth in places that most people never saw, for people whose names never made the news across decades and continents and causes. And it showed up at home the same way it showed up everywhere else. In the car, and we spent so much of our life in cars, he would reach back his hand to find mine while he was on the phone. It didn't matter who was on the other end of the line, presidents, organizers, global leaders. The call would continue and still his hand would find mine. I understand now that he reached back deliberately every single time, as if to say, while I may be carrying many, I am still holding you. And it wasn't anything. It was the classroom visits, the amusement park trips tucked between political storms, the flowers on Valentine's Day, the flowers on my birthday, the flowers when I was sick, just to show his love that showed up every year without fail. My dad loved me and proud. He was relentless about it because it mattered to him. It mattered to him deeply, structurally, the same way that everything mattered to him, that I never once questioned whether I was somebody. Now I understand that those were seeds. My father was always in the business of future-proofing, preparing people and possibilities for a future already on its way. He future-proofed movements, he future-proofed leaders, and in the quietest way, he was future-proofing me. Planting steadiness, planting worth, planting faith, preparing ground he might not personally harvest, but believing it would bloom anyway. So today I am not standing here as a historian of his movement. Others will speak to the breadth of what he built far better than I can today. I am standing here as his daughter, the baby of the family, bereft and amazed, and so deeply grateful that enough of his love was poured into me across 26 years that I know I will never run out. Our stories are not parallel, they are intertwined. Dad, the same distance you spoke about between where you start and where you stand shaped you as a leader, and it shaped you as a father. The world watched you bend the moral arc toward justice, and I watched you bend toward you. I am grateful for every mile we tried together, Dad. I love you in every lifetime, and until we meet again, I'll find you in the rainbows.
Powerful, powerful words. 26 years old. So certainly the Gen Zers are seeing the Reverend Jesse Jackson's life in a different lens. And now we're here from his youngest son and the one who has taken up the mantle to run the organization, Yusuf Jackson. And this presentation was given at the House of Hope celebration, which was held Friday morning on March 6th in Chicago. And here are the words of Yusuf Jackson. Youngest son and fourth child among the Jackson siblings, Yusuf has taken on the daunting task of continuing the work of his father as president and CEO of the Rainbow Push Coalition, using his business management expertise to maintain the organization his father founded. He pointed out that Reverend Jackson's work was first and foremost driven by his faith and the spiritual principles he followed.
He carried a well-read Bible, not as a symbol, but as a guide. He lived a revolutionary Christian faith rooted in justice, nonviolence, and the moral righteousness of standing with the least of these. He practiced that faith, sometimes on his knees, but more often on his feet, on picket lines in jails, at makeshift hospitals and parks in New York City, comforting AIDS patients.
Yes, as Reverend Jackson said, the least of these, but he was there for them. And so his children give a powerful testimony of his life, his legacy, his lessons. And you can read more about his work and much of the tributes that happened over a good week's time, an entire week. But such was the impact of Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr. I'm Naima Latif, and this has been the On Air Daily News Hour, and we're looking forward to bringing you news and insight and perhaps a bit of history as we prepare to move forward. You can go to onair.dailynews.com and follow us every day. Subscribe so you can get those notices in your email every day and get news that can empower you and help you to transform lives. We've got a caller going to take about 30 seconds with area code 773-379-8362. Did you like what you heard from Reverend Jackson's children? Yes.
Are expanding and enhancing your media empire.
Yes, we most certainly are. And I'm excited as well because this gives a chance for us to touch people in a different kind of way. And we will continue to be interactive. As you can see, you can pull up the website and the pictures come to life, both video and stills, so you can really feel what's happening. And we're appreciative of the technology that makes that happen. So thank you so very much, Mr. Andrew Nelson Bay, and we appreciate your perspective as well.
It's Mayor of Chicago, by the way.
Absolutely.
And my woman Amber Rose is Chicago's first lady in the making.
Well, we're grateful that you are continuing to share your views and aspirations. We've got to go now, but we certainly will be back every week, and we're looking forward to all of those who are following us on the On Air Daily News and also the Female Solution Global broadcast on Facebook and YouTube. Subscribe and follow so you can stay informed and you can be part of the solution. I'm Naima Latif. Come on back tomorrow for Master Force with Mushem Sut, and then in the evening with Nonprofits Empowering Worlds with Bridget. And until that time, continue to shine your light. We've come to the end of our show today. If you missed any broadcasts, go to our website for the audio and video archives at www.thefemalesolution.com. On behalf of our team of radio hosts, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in today's discussions. And to our global family joining us from all around the world, we say thank you. To our family in China, xie xie. India, Dhanyavad. Japan, arigato. Korea, kamsamnida. Russia, spasiba. Germany, danke. Poland, dziękuję. France, merci. Spain, gracias. Italy, grazie. Egypt, shukran. Ghana, madasi. Nigeria, eshe. South Africa, Ngiyabonga. Senegal, Jaref. Kenya, Asante. Israel, Toda. Pakistan, Shukriya. Afghanistan, Tashakur. Saudi Arabia and Palestine, Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you, and may peace be upon you and the mercy of God and God's blessings.